Next up, let's talk about the patterns of religion throughout this area. And we have some incredibly ancient religions in this area. Hinduism is one of the oldest, if not the oldest, surviving religion in the world. And before we get into the individual religions, just study this map for a minute. Okay? We've got one religion that covers a huge amount of territory, right? And that territory conforms very well with the overall shape of India. Right? But it also is found in this square, rectangular country. Okay? Then we have another religion that really dominates over here in the west and in the east. Okay? And there's some scattered things. There's some little bits, but overall, we can see we've got one religion that really dominates in the area, and then another religion that is in two places here. Okay. And then there's another pattern. We've got a bunch of this blue color here. We've got some blue color down here on the island, and then little bits scattered. Okay. And then there's this red. Okay. We're not going to worry about the green and the aqua. We don't need to worry about those for the moment. But that is the overall pattern. Okay, so we've got a lot of religious complexity overall, but we can break it down into a very clear and strong spatial pattern. Okay, so this brown color that is so dominant, that is Hinduism. The yellow, of course, is Islam. The blue color, that is Buddhism. Remember that Buddhism evolved in this area as a reaction to Hinduism and to the caste system. I have linked a couple articles or a video about the caste system. And we have another religion that we have not talked about at all this semester called Sikhism, and it evolved here too. This is the hearth of Sikhism, and it too is a reaction to Hinduism and what the people who became Sikhs felt were the inequities of Hinduism. And we'll talk more about that in just a minute. Okay? So Hinduism, then, is more than 80% of the population in two countries, in India, right, and in Nepal. So those two countries, Hinduism is more than 80% of the population. We also have Islam. Right? We consider Islam a minority in this part of the world, but we're still talking about millions and millions of people. And so we still have a very large number of of Muslim people in this area. So they may be a minority within India, but in two places in South Asia, they are a majority. And those two places are Pakistan, over here in the west, and Bangladesh over here in the east. More than 80% of the population in both Bangladesh and Pakistan are Muslim. Okay. That other 20% in the two there, overall, the largest percentage of that is Hindu. There's some other religions you don't need to worry about, but overall. So that 20% in the Hindu countries, in India, that other 20%, those are Muslims for the most part, and then a couple other religions. So Hinduism, 80% of the population in Nepal and India, and Islam is more than 80% of the population in Bangladesh and Pakistan. All right. Buddhism, while it faded in India, is still quite dominant in Bhutan. We talked about that when we talked about gross national happiness. About 75% of the population of Bhutan is Buddhist. And then we also have a bunch of people who are Buddhist in Nepal. There's some Buddhists up here in kind of the Chinese-controlled areas in Jammu and Kashmir, and then down here in Sri Lanka. So Buddhism is still present in the area, but it is not dominant. And then Sikhism is the red. This area right here. It's in the northern part of India, not the very furthest northern part, but it is towards the north. And it is really confined overall to the state of Punjab. It is one of the states of India, and that is where Sikhism evolved. That's where it began, and that is where most of the people who are Sikhs still live. Okay? So that is our strong spatial pattern of religion through the area. Let's talk about Hinduism in a bit more detail. Okay, so this is probably the world's oldest organized religion that is still being practiced. It is very ancient. The founders are lost to time. We have no idea where the religion came from. There is no one person that we can point to and say, this is the beginner, this is the prophet that began it. It is very ancient. It is also the third largest religion in the world in terms of adherents, in terms of followers. We've already talked about the two largest, Christianity and then Islam. And then because the population of India is so large, that makes Hinduism the third largest religion in the world. Okay? But it has a very different pattern than either Christianity or Islam, both of which are found in many different countries. Hinduism is found largely in India. That is not entirely true because we've had what is called a diaspora, which is a movement of people, a dispersal of people. And people from India have migrated all over the world. But the vast majority of Hindus are still in India. So it is a different pattern than the number one religion and the number two religion in the world. Okay? But as I said, there's no single founder or prophet for this religion. There's no one sacred text or doctrine. There's no central religious authority. There's no pope or something like that with a hierarchy. And there's no single concept of what a deity, of what the divine, of what God is. Okay? And so these are ways that in the West that we tend to define religion. There's usually a founder or someone that you can point to. We have a sacred text, right? The Quran or the Bible. There's a structure of priests or a hierarchy for the religion. And then there's an idea of what God is. Okay? Those are the ways that we tend to define religion in the West. Well, Hinduism does not conform to any of those. This is an Eastern religion, and it defies those kinds of borders. It's a completely different way of thinking about the world. In fact, Hinduism is really more a philosophy than it is a religion, because it really doesn't hit these kind of traditional check boxes of what we consider a religion. Okay, so it's more a collection of beliefs, an approach to living, than it is a religion. There are as many different ways to practice Hinduism as there are Hindus. There are people who are vegetarian and there are people who are not. There are people who fast regularly and people who don't. There are people who go to temple every day or on certain days of the week, and there are people who never go to a temple. So there are people who follow some books and people who don't. Right? There's all sorts of different ways that you can follow Hinduism, which is why it's considered more a philosophy than an organized religion. It is also an ethnic religion. Okay? It is tied to sacred locations, to rivers, to mountains, to valleys, those kinds of things. There's also no conversions. We have a cycle of rebirth and reincarnation, and if you weren't born into that cycle, you're really not a part of this belief system. So all of those things together, the fact that we have the holidays like Diwali, which is the harvest festival, the holidays are tied to the seasons. There's no single founder or prophet. We're tied to physical locations being sacred. All of those things are indications that this is an ethnic religion. And then I know I'm using the word religion, even though I said it was more a philosophy than a religion, but we still classify it as an ethnic religion. Okay? A couple more thoughts here. This statue, this is a piece of the cultural landscape, right? The way that the religion is expressed on things that people build, really captures a lot about Islam. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry, about Hinduism. Because on the one hand, this is a single god. Right? There's one god that is here in the middle. And yet at the same time, there are all of these gods that are also part of that god. So we have this really interesting combination of things going on here where there is an idea of a single idea of the divine, and yet within that divinity there are millions, literally millions of divisions that are possible that different people believe in and different people worship. So in Hinduism, gods and goddesses are seen as manifestations of the divine, which many ultimately see as a single entity. So, is this monotheism because there's a single entity, or is this polytheism because there's so many different manifestations of the divine? Right? All of these different faces are all representing different aspects here. And that is a great question, and it really can't be answered. It is both. Once again, this is a religion that does not conform to Western ideas of religion. Right? It is many things, it is multiplicities all at once. But this is a religion that is also found in all aspects of life. It governs everything from what you eat to who you marry to the jobs you have to how you structure your life and go to religious services. So it is found in all aspects of life. It's also found all over the landscape. There are temples everywhere. There are paintings. There's art. There's statues. The way people dress, the jewelry they wear, right? All of these things that people build to express their culture, Hinduism is very, very much present within them. And I have a clip for you that is linked down below that is from a show that Morgan Freeman did. And it is all about this multiplicity, all of these different aspects. And you will, as you're watching it, you will also see a lot of examples of Hinduism on the cultural landscape. You'll see temples. Keep your eye out for some animals, right? Some sacred animals specifically, and look for examples of the way that Hinduism shows up on the landscape. One more indication that this is an ethnic religion or an ethnic classification for this, natural features are deities. Right? And so the Ganges and the Yamuna, which are, the Ganges is seen as the mother river. It is seen as a sacred goddess. They have actually been granted the same legal rights as human beings. They can be represented by humans as an entity in court with rights. So, because these rivers are seen as sacred, this is clearly an ethnic religion. We are tied to physical features here. And this is a really important step of environmentalism within India, because now the rivers can sue kind of on their behalf, right, through people to protect the river itself and to work on ending pollution. So if you have a leather working company or a chemical factory, the entities can sue on behalf of the river and try to get things cleaned up. Water pollution is a very serious problem in India, and this is an example of culture, of the religion, really lending itself to finding some solutions. All right, so there's a bit about the complexity that is Hinduism, okay? And we will come back and we will talk about Sikhism.